What does someone coming from a Buddhist background find appealing and engaging about Yeshua and Mary Magdalene? Today, I have with me Kamani Jinadasa. How did I do?
Perfect. Well done.
Great. A lovely human being, which we've been having an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit in the green room before going live. And I can't wait to interview her and bring her perspective and story to light on the Magdalene. As you know, I'm Melissa Keenan. I started the Magdalene Interview Series to broaden the conversation around who Mary Magdalene is, which therefore is then a reflection of who women are today and what principles are found there that can deeply benefit our lives and the lives of those around us, especially as women leaders. And I've also created this in conjunction with the fact that I am leading a pleasure pilgrimage, Magdalene Black Madonna pilgrimage to the south of France in September, and would love to invite you to come and commune with us and immerse deeply into that land and into this frequency and fill up your cup with these elements of ancient feminine codes and leadership. So without further ado, Kamani, would you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about
Sure.
who you are and the work that you do in the world.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, Melissa, I am deeply, deeply grateful to you for this interview series, giving me, not only me, but so many other women a space to talk about a being and teachings that are so relevant and important today. And this is how the space grows. We take the space and we have to move forward. And thank you so much for providing the platform. So about me, just in a very generic way, because I guess we're going to go in deeper later on. So basically, I'm a person who works on gender-based violence globally. I have been working on also trying to understand perpetration of violence, masculinities. Also, I started my own NGO called Shanti Margam in Sri Lanka for the emotional well-being of children and youth to kind of break cycles of violence. And the reason why I'm part of this conversation today is because of my personal journey, my spiritual journey as a Buddhist that ended up wanting to do speeches and talks about Mary Magdalene. So I've been through this process of curiosity that could never be quelled, and just opening my heart and in the most incredible ways having access to information that I need. I always believe that what I need will come to me. And my journey about learning about Mary Magdalene, my connection with Yeshua, evolved in this way. And I think, I wanted to also say that I realize that I think this kind of understanding or this kind of exploration also emerges at a point in our lives when we are in our darkest time, maybe, and you're looking for answers, and that's where your values come into place, or in the sense what guides you in your life come into place. And then, I don't know, somehow things just start coming, whatever you need. Yeah, that was a long self-introduction.
Thank you for sharing that. And I so resonate and relate to what you said about it's like when we're in our darkest hour. And when I think about darkness, I think about like womb space or soil, or it becomes this fertile ground where we're no longer hard and have it all figured out and have so much certainty. We are suddenly more vulnerable and more open, and then the deeper truths can come in that space. And so it's those times that we think, oh my goodness, I wish I didn't have to go through this, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this, sometimes that we are in that liminal space where all the magic begins to happen, or the seeds are planted. So I'd love to hear, does that fit into your journey?
Totally. And I feel, diving straight into the what I also understand as the teachings of Mary and Yeshua is the need to go into that deep dark space, because I see, as a person who's been involved in the field of spirituality and energy work for for 14 years now, very, specifically, if you could take the time I started learning energy healing as the start date, I've noticed a lot of spiritual bypassing, people wanting to just always be in that happy, free space and says, oh, everything's going to be okay. Everything has to be okay. But growth happens, this shadow work is so integral, because that's when you really get to know who you are. And I feel the world is a reflection of this inability to go into that dark space.
Yeah.
And to look at it with compassion, and then to do what needs to be done. Because yes, the energy work and connecting with the divine is all very, very important, but at the same time, I mean, for me, the Buddhist aspect of balance, going on the middle path, is so important. You don't go only into the shadow work, and you don't only go into the light work. You go in that middle path. And so for me, shadow work is as important as light work.
I completely agree. And I find this really interesting and beautiful that you bring that up in the context of Yeshua or Jesus. That, in my experience with previous, relationship with Christianity and church and things, Jesus was always only ever light, always. And I'm like, it's only now recently occurring to me that that's only part of the picture, even when it comes to Jesus. So, and I feel like, and we talked about this a little bit before we went live, this element of coming to Jesus without some type of authority telling you who he is and therefore who you are, has given you a kind of fresh or pure perspective of who Jesus is. I'd love to hear you talk about this.
Sure, of course.
Relationship with Yeshua and the relationship with Mary Magdalene, and kind of how all of that lands.
Came into being. Yeah. I mean, just also before I go into that, I wanted to point out that I really like this this series called Chosen. I don't know if you've watched it.
Yes, I have.
Because finally it talks about it has the female disciples, like 2 or 3 of them, but at least they're there. And it shows Jesus having a personality, a person who loses his temper, a person who's in joy. I mean, it's sad because, you always see Yeshua on a cross in this place of suffering, whereas, so you kind of don't even have the permission. You feel, I guess Christians don't feel the permission to even enjoy life, but life is to be lived and enjoy. And I believe that he and Mary Magdalene and all of them had their ups and downs. They were human beings, but anyway, so going into my journey. So I was born a Buddhist, and Buddhism has been a very important foundation for me, because, well, my parents are Buddhist, and I lived in England in my early years, and my mother had this very severe mental health problem, and so it was very violent, very awful at home. And my father, well, he was like my mom. And he died when I was a kid. But Buddhism, because I turned to meditation, it really made a lot of sense to me, because Buddhism is a philosophy, even though it's taken as a religion with a lot of practices. Ultimately, it's all about going inwards and, looking at yourself and, seeing what is triggering you to behave in a particular way. But in addition to all of this, as a kid living in England, I was really curious about Yeshua. And it was a real no-no in my family because of my mother's illness. She was like, no way, there's no way you even talk about Jesus, like no Christianity. It's really the worst thing. But whenever I could, I would, I remember as a kid sneaking into a church in England, trying to look around and, seeing, okay, what is this? And for me, the place, all I remember is this very dark, scary place. That's the only impression I got as a kid. And then when we moved to Sri Lanka, and I went to an Anglican school, and so I would go to the church, and I really wanted to understand the Bible, because there are good parts in the Bible, and I would sneak into these Bible study groups, but still I always heard this line of, repenting and sinning, and it just didn't resonate with me. And so years later, as I was turning to adulthood, I started becoming curious. I was reading these books. Jesus lived in India, and then around the same time, I noticed my interest in Mary Magdalene coming up. And I can't remember exactly when it happened, but there was this Netflix documentary on Mary Magdalene, and showing her as this priestess, as a prophet in the time of Yeshua. And I was like, what? What? And I had this real desire to learn more about her as well. So it was both at the same time. And but in my energy healing, I remember when I went for my first energy healing, Yeshua appeared, and the person who did the healing, she said, "I don't know how to tell you this because you're a Buddhist." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. He came, didn't he? And he left a message." And I was like, "Yeah." And then I realized that my connection with him was going to be a one-on-one connection. It was, and with the energy healing, what happens is when you learn Reiki or something, is that your psychic abilities, all of these things open up. It's not closed anymore, right? Because society ingrains us in a way to close everything up. And so I started connecting with his energy, and at the same time, this real thirst for learning about Mary Magdalene was coming up as well. And I remember placing, trying to grab hold of any book I could find on her.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the pivotal book was Megan Watterson's book, Mary Magdalene Revealed. That was just so beautifully written. And also it brings in the Thunder and the Perfect Mind, that beautiful poem, which brings, it's the paradox of the feminine. So the thing is, in my energy healings, Yeshua appears a lot, and he's been present, and he provides the guidance, and then Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary also. Mother Mary is also another person not spoken enough about in her whole persona. She's just presented as this Virgin Mary, but no, she was so much more. And I remember my very defining moment on Mary Magdalene was in 2019, I had to go to England for something. And then I went to Glastonbury. And I remember just, the energy there is just so beautiful. And I just walked into this tiny chapel, and I was just seated there. I had read the book on Mary Magdalene Revealed, and it talks about Glastonbury being a really important place. So I'm in this chapel, it feels really nice, and then I just wanted to check, okay, who is this chapel dedicated to? And then I realized it was to Mary Magdalene. And that was the first time. And then there were these postcards that you could buy off, and that was the first time I bought my Mary Magdalene memorabilia, so to speak, and that was a sign for me, that was like, okay, that's it, you have to keep to this path. And for me, the path of Mary Magdalene, and then of course reading the gospel, wanting to understand it more, has been a very guided one. It's been because it also came at a time when I had this deep calling to really bring out the divine feminine. So someone who has deeply encouraged me in this work is a friend here in Vienna called Mike, who runs energy circles. And so I'd be at his energy circles, and I'd be like, we really need to remember the divine feminine, and you need to bring it in. And so I don't even know what it is like, but I'm getting these messages and guidance on how to do it, And so for me, my journey has been so, I think maybe because I've let go of the ego, things just seep in. And working with the ego is a very fundamental piece in Buddhism. Of course, my ego is still there. Otherwise, I lose my temper. I have,
Of course.
I mean, let's not, I mean, we have to acknowledge all of these aspects, the beauty of our complexity, So yeah, that's how my journey with Mary Magdalene and Yeshua has been moving forward. And I realized, so Mike asked me to do a talk on Mary Magdalene in 2023 after I went to St. Paul. Because I thought I had to go to St. Paul. It was my personal pilgrimage. It was just wow. And I remember feeling so nervous, and because I didn't, I think those of us who connect with Mary Magdalene, we feel this deep sense of responsibility to portray her the best way possible, because she's been so misunderstood. And I mean, I think this will be another topic in our conversation. The way women are misunderstood and treated is our story. It's very, very personal, right? And when I was preparing the talk, I realized, when you understand her and her gospel, you understand Yeshua more as well. And then I realized to know her is to know him, and to know him is to know her. And I felt this was beautifully captured in one of these statues or offerings in St. Baume in the grotto, where there's a carving of a book which says, "Thank you, mercy, Mary, mercy, Yeshua." And it's like, yes, you have understood that both of them go together, and they, to understand the story fully, you need to understand both, and it goes both ways.
Wow, that is so beautiful. What do you feel that even today, as many are waking up to like Mary Magdalene and the reality of who she is, like what do you feel like you see people missing that you have received from Mary, or where's the gaps?
I think, I mean, I need to feel this, but I feel it's more of, I think for me, both of them set out on a path of helping us connect deeper with ourselves. And while they were wonderful role models, and it helps us to have role models, they would want us to connect with who we are, and this is where the culture of Hinduism becomes really important. You talk the Kali, you talk of Shakti, Durga. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they are the goddess of, Kali, the goddess of destruction. She's portrayed in a very like, it's like when you connect with the energy, it's like giving you permission to show your anger and show it raw, because destruction is needed for the transformation. So I think, I mean, for me, I feel it's this, because if we do this process of worshiping, I mean, the thing is, we are all, this greater consciousness includes all these beings, and for me, when I connect with my divinity, I'm connecting with the energy of people I choose to engage more with, right? So they're all, I mean, we say that the human is the most densest form of expression, the 3D, when in this 3D point. And the thing is, what's been happening in most religions is that you have these images of these goddesses or these beings, and you start worshiping them. But actually, we need to be worshiping ourselves. And that's where people, because I think as humans, I mean, sadly, in this patriarchal world, we've just become so accustomed to needing to follow someone.
Yeah.
But the reality for me with the work with Mary Magdalene has been just connect with yourself and tap into your divinity. That's what her gospel is about also, right? There's that really powerful statements in there. The thing is, I mean, so one of the direct actions coming from my work with Mary Magdalene has been my women's circle. And there I find it to be totally guided. I select topics because also as a feminist and also as a person working on gender-based violence and sexual reproductive health, etc., knowing how women have been suppressed, right? And Mary Magdalene's story is every woman's story. I mean, even today, just before we were talking about this horrible men's academy, like how does that even happen? How are you so disconnected from yourself to be okay to treat women with such violence? Because the way you treat another person means this is the way you see yourself. Like how is that? And you see the feminine, the woman who represents the feminine, because you also men also have the feminine within them,
Right.
right? And it's totally shut off, like, so yeah, for me, the women's circle has been one of my key ways of connecting with our own power. And for me, the connection with the womb energy has been so important. Even for me, it's been over the past 2 or 3 years that I really started understanding this. And I think I feel like rambling, but
There's so much to say. It's beautiful.
I don't know if I'm speaking currently anymore. But for me, I mean, I always tell the women in the circle, I want you to tap into your own power.
Yeah.
Don't feel that if you're expressing yourself this way, it's not right. Because once again, you're falling into the trap of the expectations of society, which have been formed through the patriarchy, all the social norms and the whole thing. I think for me, the reason why the Magdalene energy is rising so much now is because it's a time to break through it. It's done. It's over, and that's why there's also so much pushback. Let us assert this final bastion of power.
Right, absolutely. Well, I love all of that you shared. It hasn't felt like rambling to me. I've just been eating it all up. And you you talked at the beginning about how you do work around gender violence and supporting youth and sex education and things like that. And I would be curious how, like, you've been doing that for a long time, how you feel that this relationship with Mary Magdalene has maybe influenced that, or maybe I even more pointedly want to ask, like, if Mary Magdalene was involved in your work today, like alive, like what would she say? Like, just I feel like that element is it is so important, and I feel that she helps stir this activism in us. And so I would be curious, has your relationship with Mary changed how you see the work you do, or I guess I've asked too many questions, but yeah, a little.
No. But I have too many answers to this question. So, I mean, just a little bit of history of myself as well. It's important to note and to state that, and this is a term someone used on me recently. I come from a lineage of feminine, the divine feminine from my father's side. So in Sri Lanka, there's a goddess called Patini, who is the patron goddess of Sri Lanka, and she oversees women and children. She protects women and children. And my dad used to always take me to her shrine, and his family, his sisters, used to have her energy. They used to go into trances and things like that. And my first spiritual experience was with her at one of her shrines in a very spiritual place in Sri Lanka. But my work on gender started when I was a law student. I was doing volunteer work with the Family Planning Association. Then I was going all around Sri Lanka. And suddenly I was just like, okay, one day I am just going to work only on women and children. I've said this at interviews, back in the day when I was being interviewed for human resource positions, I'd be like, yeah, this is what I'm doing now, but one day it's going to be focusing entirely on this work. And activism, the passion, the feeling for it has always been part of my life. And when I had that first Reiki healing session when Yeshua came, because I used to think, why do I feel so strongly about this, about Earth, about wanting to protect and wanting to, because I've never been married, I don't have children. And yet here I have this, deep passion to want to protect. And And one of the messages was also around that on my journey of what my role is, So I was like, okay, so that's from Yeshua. And it also helped me understanding that, their spirituality also was around activism. Even when you talk about Lord Buddha, Yeshua, Mary Magdalene, I mean, they broke the norm. They were challenging the systems, Lord Buddha on caste system, getting anyone to become a monk, Buddhist monk, Yeshua questioning the Romans and the Jewish, methods and the way they were honoring God. And Mary Magdalene, who in the book Anna, the grandmother of Jesus, if that is my Bible, that is the most beautiful book ever. For me, it's like an amalgamation of every kind of thought I have had in my body around
Wow.
all of this. And so it was just such a, and it talks about how, and I think also in other texts, it's come up that Mary Magdalene was the daughter of Joseph of Arimathea, who was very rich. And she set up orphanages and shelters, and, she helped women and children. And I think, the work that we do around this is very, very important. You cannot disconnect, And through my association or deeper connection with Mary Magdalene, what has happened is that I want to go deeper now into my work. It's been gender-based violence should not be happening, women's rights, equality. But now, because also connecting with the feminine, when I go to Greece, I feel this deep connection. It was a matriarchal society when it was thriving, Crete, and just understanding that, if women were in their full power, what a different world it will be today. I mean, because there's a great way they describe not only the disappearance of Mary Magdalene, but also a kind of representation of how women were given space, or how space was taken away from women. There's a reference to a carving of Mary Magdalene and Lazarus being resurrected by Yeshua. And there's one of the images from closer to his death in the 1st century, I think. There's a picture of Lazarus, Yeshua, and Mary Magdalene, all the same height. And then later on, you see her getting smaller as a person. And at one point, she's crouching as a person. And then at one point, she's totally out of the picture. And I feel that is what has been done to women as well. I mean, and that's why Mary Magdalene's story is so personal to us, because, every time you hear the way she's referred to, it's like, no, it's not just her, you're talking about me, And I think, so for me, it's been a very powerful turning. And honestly, personally in my life, it's been also an interesting time where I know that I need to step deeper into this work of, working with women at a much, much deeper level, and wanting to equip myself with the tools necessary to do it in an accountable and responsible manner. But yeah, it's going into the core of what it is to be a woman, and to really, I mean, so in gender work we talk about intersectionality. Once again, it's about woman, a brown woman of a religion, or a religion that is not accepted. In Sri Lanka, you would see that. And but now it's not just intersectionality. For me, it's more the full being, influenced by your society, what you've grown up with. How do we honor all of that? Because I feel the world really needs to see, because even when you think about Mary Magdalene and her personality, I feel, I felt the deep connection with her. And as I told you, in my energy healings, I've seen past memories, and I see her as a very alive and joyous person, mischievous. And so is Yeshua, like full of life. I don't think he wanted to be always remembered as his person on a cross. I think he wanted us to remember, life is to be lived and to be enjoyed and to love, And there's this beautiful, very powerful thing that Megan Watterson says in her book. And she says, just imagine just imagine if in the churches they had an image of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene in love, how that would have just changed so much, that this man could fall in love because he's now being painted as this person who was celibate and blah blah blah. He couldn't. I mean, he had children. He was. I mean, he was a normal human being.
Yeah.
Okay, and he fell in love, and the beauty of it, and the fact that he honored a woman to be his equal. You
Yeah.
know, just imagine what a different world. But of course, the church represents all of the, upholding of the patriarchal norms for power. I mean, that's what patriarchy is all about.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you for just all of this has been so insightful and beautiful. And as we bring this conversation to a close, I just want to ask, is there any final thing on your heart that you'd like to share that you feel like, oh, if I end this interview and I haven't said this thing?
I mean, if I were to think of Mary Magdalene, I would say make it your own personal journey, because it's all about really reconnecting with the power of who you are, and don't be afraid to connect with your feminine side. It is needed more than ever today, men, women, and transgender people. And there's another thing I want to say, though, if that's okay. Understanding that the feminine was represented in many ways in Yeshua's ministry. The physical representation of having female and male disciples, believe that to be true. I mean, for many young women, that would be such a deal breaker, and for men. And then number 2 would be connecting with your feminine side without fear. That is what the world needs. The world is being represented. What we're seeing today is the lack of the feminine, and we really need to do it. And exploring and understanding, like, don't limit your knowledge and wisdom to one book or one religion. Go to the depth and to the core of, say, even Sufism is so beautiful. There are Islamic texts also that are so, so beautiful. I mean, for me, Buddhism is always going to be my foundation. And what they wanted was not for us to blindly follow something. They brought together all this ancient wisdom. Yeshua was in Tibet, Buddhism, etc. They wanted us to live it, to see it, to understand it. So do it, And so that was a lot in my last point.
Thank you so much, Kamani, and just appreciate who you are, who you're being, the work that you're doing in the world, and the relationship that you have formed with Mary Magdalene. It's so beautiful to get to have connected with so many people from so many different backgrounds and hear the different ways that people relate with Mary Magdalene, and then hear some of our common threads, like and this undercurrent of like love and love deeper is so profound to me. So I thank you for bringing your voice to this conversation and sharing your heart and your wisdom around this.
Thank you. I mean, it is such an important time to bring all the voices. Thank you so much for creating the platform.
Absolutely. And thanks to those of you who have watched with us on the Magdalene Interview Series. I think I have 5 interviews today. So basically, you'll see me here all day. Come back and join us for more. And we'll see you next time on the Magdalene Interview Series. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.